morning, everyone. Happy first day of Lent this Ash Wednesday morning as you're hopefully watching this. I want to start this morning by telling you a really interesting story that I heard. I was reading this story the other day, and it turns out not too long ago there was this young man who thought he was absolutely hands down the best when it came to chopping down trees with an axe. And he was pretty good. I mean, he was probably one of the best out there. He thought he was so good, though, that he thought he was the best, that no one could best him. As it happened, there was this older gentleman who had been doing, chopping trees for many years. And so this young man thought, I'm going to challenge that guy, because I bet I'm even better than him. So this young man goes to this man who's been chopping trees for years and says, I want to challenge you. One day of work, see who can chop down the most trees. The older man said, all right, that's fine, let's do it. So the day finally came. And at the sound of a whistle, these two men began just chopping down trees in an attempt to chop down more than the other. Well, as the day progressed, the young man just wouldn't stop, would not take a breath. I mean, he was just going and going and going. Every once in a while, he'd look over and he began to realize that every hour or so, the other gentleman who had been doing this for many years was taking like 10, 15-minute breaks almost every hour. And this young man's like, there's no way this guy can catch me. And so he just keeps going as this other man is taking breaks. Well, finally, the end of the day rolls around, and they total up all the trees that were chopped down by the two men. And as it turns out, the older man who had been chopping trees for years chopped down 1/3 more than this younger guy. And of course, being a young man, he was frustrated. He's like, how in the world did this guy best me? There's no way this is possible. So he kind of swallows his pride, and he goes over to this gentleman, and he says, look, I've got to know. How did you do this? The older gentleman says, well, those breaks that I know you saw me taking, that you didn't take, during those breaks, I was sharpening my axe. I love that story because it helps us understand the importance of our own spiritual lives and the sharpening that needs to happen in our relationship with God. In 2 Chronicles 20, a passage of scripture I was reading through here this morning, there's a very interesting story about another person who recognized the need to sharpen their own axe, both literally and figuratively, actually. But in 2 Chronicles 20, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, is looking out, and he's realizing that the Ammonites, the Moabites, and even some Meunites have come to set war against Judah. And Jehoshaphat's like, that is a way bigger army than I can beat with my own. There's no chance that we can beat them without a miracle. And Jehoshaphat says, I need to seek the Lord. And I declare a fast across all of Judah as we seek his will for us. Not only is Jehoshaphat recognizing that war is coming, but what he realizes is that there's a more important sharpening that needs to happen, a trust that needs to happen in God to deliver them from these enemies that are gathering at their gates. We've been recognizing, I think, lately how much we've lost in the past year in so many different ways. Between family members dying to COVID, to losing out on some of the gatherings that we were looking forward to even feeling like God is, sometimes feeling really distant for some of us, I think. There's a hurt and a pain and a loss that we've all suffered at some level here. Some more than others, but we've all felt it. And I think one of the most important things to recognize is that there's a spiritual battle, I think, happening within us all right now. And just like Jehoshaphat, I want to ask you to join me once again, like I did last week, throughout Lent, to take one day a week and fast. And the Wesleyan way of doing it was to eat dinner on Thursday, and then after that meal to fast through roughly 3 p.m. on Friday or up until your next meal. But I want you to fast whatever works for you, but I want to invite you to join me. Take a day. Set it aside for God. Abstain from eating and there's different theories on how to do your fast. The most important thing is that we recognize whatever we abstain from, whatever we take away during that time, whether it be everything except water, or if it's just the solid foods that we would normally eat, whatever that looks like for you, set that time aside and focus on time with God. Recognize that our spiritual hunger right now supersedes our physical needs. Recognize that when we fast, that if we focus our energy toward spending time with God, to meeting God where He's waiting for us in those holy moments, that we will be filled with something far greater than what our stomachs are yearning for. And that intensity of God's presence will be felt. And that time of fasting and prayer together as a church brings us closer into recognizing what God may be able to do through us, in spite of the armies that we feel are gathered against us in so many ways. I'm going to link in the description of this video. I'm going to link a website that I invite you to take a look at to get a little more information about what it means to fast in the Wesleyan tradition. And then, as I mentioned last week, every Friday morning at 9 a.m., if you're available to join me via Zoom, we're going to be taking a look at some of the liturgies that have been offered through that Book of Common Prayer on that website for Friday mornings, as a chance for us all to gather, not only to seek God, but to seek God together as a community of believers. And my hope is that you will join us. And if you can't join us on Fridays, I still encourage you, take one day, whatever day it is you're fasting, whatever that morning is, whatever time you have, to go to that website and pull up that daily opportunity of worship, and even just do it on your own as a way to connect with God, to use that as the bridge that brings us into God's presence. Because fasting alone is not what it's about. Fasting is not the end game, but it is a means by which we come to God, seeking Him. Folks, we got some axes maybe to sharpen, but I believe once we sharpen those axes, God is going to release us to doing some amazing things. So let's make sure that we take the time to sharpen our axes now, so that we can chop down as many trees as possible going forward. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.